Welcome to the Praxology Podcast, where theology fuels the mission of the church. We have a few special segments coming for you to think biblically, reflect theologically, and of course, act missionally. I am Sean Smith with your co-host, Landon Lamas. That's right, you heard that correctly. Landon will be helping us to think today about leading and serving missionally by using authority in a biblical sense. If you've ever wanted to embrace power and wield authority, then put your seatbelt on as we cruise into today's episode. And we'll begin by addressing the strange person that's sitting across from me. He may be a stranger to many of you, but he's certainly no stranger to me or to Formation College, Josiah Venture, or the topic of leading teams and using authority. Landon, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself to us?
Well, hello, Sean. It's great to be on the Praxology Podcast. I'm excited to be with you. And yeah, I've been here serving with Josiah Venture in the Czech Republic for over 9 years now, and have been grateful for the time here. My wife and I got married and lived in California for 6 years, and then moved out here, and now have been serving with Josiah Venture primarily for our beginning time working with camps, and involved with bringing short-term teams from the U.S. and the U.K. to come and help do English camps here. And then the last 4 years have been with the Formation team, so getting to help teach and facilitate, and also getting to help with students set up their internships, and have been just having a great time with you guys at the Formation team. So it's been good.
Yeah, it's been great. Last 4 years, we've learned a lot, and we're continuing to grow ourselves in many ways.
We are. And
so just to set the structure for this episode, for those watching, thanks for watching, and those listening, thank you for tuning in. We'll start with asking Landon several questions, just more in the sense of who is this guy? We want to get to know him.
Who am I?
And then we're going to jump right in to talking about authority and the Bible. And we'll discuss one particular text that we'll introduce. So Landon, our title of our current season is Serving Missionally, Your Knowledge Toolkit for Success. So I have to ask, what led to your desire for serving missionally here in the Czech Republic? You alluded to that a little bit already. What led to your desire to do so?
Yeah, so I came here in 2005 on a short-term trip to help with an English camp. And I was a freshman in college, and really was kind of in a decisive moment in my life. Was I going to go full-time into the business world, or was I going to go into career in ministry and in the church and missions? And so that trip played a really key moment, because it opened up my eyes to see how God was working in an international environment, like seeing God working around the world at this Czech camp, meeting Czech Christians and sharing the gospel with these Czech students. It was a really powerful experience for me. So I came back from that trip, just kind of had my world rocked, and realized I got to be thinking more about missions. I got to be thinking more about what God is doing in other parts of the world, and that he may be possibly calling me to be a part of that. So that first trip was kind of the catalyst. And then I just kept coming back every summer, helping with those camps, and also being a part of the college ministry at my church. And so I was getting to see kind of the impact on both sides. Students who would go and serve, and how that would impact their lives. And then the students who would come to the camps, and how that would impact them. And also the Czech students and leaders that we were working alongside who were believers. So those experiences were really instrumental in my development and in thinking about missions and desire to be a part of missions. And so then my wife and I got married, and as we were kind of talking about our future, we always had serving with Josiah Venture as something that we were open to, and sensing that God was calling us to, and that the Czech Republic was something that was on both of our hearts. For those of you who don't know my wife, she is Czech, so that obviously was a determining factor in that whole process. But we were talking about that and praying about that, and that was something that even when we were living in California, both of us had a desire and a growing in our heart to come back and to serve with the Czech people.
Yeah, that's in many ways not too dissimilar from my own story. Yeah. And I now am wondering how many people, before they go the route of being a missionary, entertain a thought of going into something like the business world. Or for me, it was, do I want to be a lawyer, or do I want to study theology to what I thought was be a pastor? But ultimately, it seems like maybe missionary-minded people, like those who really desire to actually travel, not just support in other ways. Maybe there's something to that in terms of the business, or how people's minds work. I don't know. I'm musing, but I'm going to move on at this point.
Yeah, definitely. I think, many people are in that journey trying to figure out where their calling is and what they're going to focus on. And short-term trips can play a big part in helping decide that.
Yeah, and maybe in those short-term trips, is there one thing that you really felt like, for you personally, this is reason enough for me to stay here in the Czech Republic, as opposed to I could be doing ministry in college, youth group, whatever, in California.
Yeah, I think the relationships were obviously a key part of that. As we were serving with local church, getting to know the youth leader and their team and the pastor, there was just a strong connection to what God was doing there locally. But then also, I think, as my wife and I were talking and looking at our gifting and our passions and seeing the way that Josiah Venture was working in the Czech Republic, all of those things, I think, factored together. So it wasn't just one moment or one event, but there was a lot of prayer, a lot of decisions, a lot of travel trips, working with people, and through those processes, it became more clear for us. Where maybe some people have a distinct one moment, but for me, for sure, it was over a 3 or 4 year period that God clarified that for us.
Yeah, nice. I think for me it was longer, and my wife was a little bit upset about that. Well, that's really great. I think now that you're here, and maybe you can focus on. You've been in the Czech Republic for how long?
9 years.
Okay, I was going to say 7, so I was wrong.
Yeah.
You can focus on the last 3 or 4 years, or you can focus on the whole 9.
Yeah.
But you're here now. What excites you the most?
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think teaching at 4 Mission, I just get so excited seeing young leaders who are passionate about the gospel, passionate about their church, and wanting to share the gospel with young people around them. So when I get to have students in my class and we get to have discussions about how to live missionally and how to think about bringing the gospel to the community around them, that is something that, that gets me fired up. And I'm inspired by them and their passion. And I have a unique situation this year where one of my students is also in my church and in serving in our youth group and in our local fusion choir ministry. And so there's just a lot of excitement also to have a student who's in my local church. And so they keep me accountable too, because if I share principles or ideas, that they can tell if I'm actually living that out or not, but also to share ideas and then to see them apply that in their ministry and then to see it actually bear fruit and know the students that they're talking about or the leaders that they're talking about. That's also been really, really exciting.
Yeah, I actually can't picture this student that you're referring to going, Landon, I heard you preach on Sunday, but Thursday in class, you said something different.
Right. Hopefully not. Hopefully not.
Oh, yeah. No, she's a fantastic student. It's cool that she gets to see you more personally and not just as a tutor, or as we call ourselves, basically a professor.
That's right.
Great opportunity. And she's always asking amazing questions in class also.
Yeah.
Let's move into then, because this podcast is a collaboration between 4 Mission College, of which both of us teach, and also Josiah Venture, from which both of us are missionaries.
We are.
What is it exactly that you are teaching? So introduce your courses to us at 4 Mission.
Yeah. So this term, I'm teaching European Mission and Ministry 500, Leading Teams and Forming Disciples.
And that's a second-year course on a 3-year program.
That's correct, yeah. And then I've also taught several of the courses. I've taught a Mission and Ministry 400 or Year 1 course. I've taught the Intro to Bible course. I've taught a 3rd-year course on leading change and conflict management. So I've gotten to teach kind of across the board, teach different classes, different years, which has actually been really enjoyable because it's also allowed me to kind of get broader exposure to the curriculum that we teach. And it's challenged me and allowed me to continue to grow and develop. So the change management and conflict class has really become a sweet spot. I really love that course and have been able to not only learn a lot myself and apply it, I realize how practical and how that's part of everyday life and getting to help students do that and live that out. And I just continue to come back to it. So I've gotten to teach several different courses and enjoy just continuing to grow as a teacher and getting to learn how to teach and then help students process through those courses.
Yeah, and that change management course, it just is one of the reasons why Tyler and I were thinking like, oh, Landon's great for this, because when we think about authority, leading change in a local church is so complex.
Yes.
And the underlying thing is really, how is authority being used?
Mm-hmm.
And so you've got a lot of practical experience as well as academic teaching experience.
Yeah.
And I will say that I think it was last year I taught a few sessions for you in, I think it was that course, because you were away for some reason. And the slides that you've put together, I'm like, wow, like this is immensely in depth for the material, but it's also at just a immensely practical level.
Yeah.
And it seems like you achieve a really good balance of the theory, but really putting it into practice.
Right. Yeah, I think that's also part of the philosophy of our school, right? Is we do want to do good scholarship and dive into some of the deeper theories on some of these concepts. So change management, there's a lot that's been written on that, and dealing with conflict. But then also we don't want to just leave it there for our students. So we're always trying to think through, how can we take that theory and bring it down and bring it into everyday life, and particularly into church life and ministry life and working with teams. And so, for example, on the change management, I read a really good, there's a really good book and thinker, John Cotter, who writes a lot on change management, but it's more for a secular workplace, kind of Fortune 500 type company environment.
But everybody's using him.
But everyone reads him and talks about him, and he's got great ideas, but he doesn't include a spiritual component. And so then I was finding another book that took a lot of his ideas, but then also incorporated the Christian spiritual element to it. And that has been, I think, a really helpful complement. And so as we teach these courses, we want to wrestle with some of the great thinkers that are right in that field, but then we also want to also say, okay, how can we take that down to our context here in the Czech Republic or in Europe? And how can we apply that in the context of a church, not just more in a broader, workplace environment or more of a secular work environment? So, yeah, I think getting to do that and trying to live out that balance between the theory and the application is a part of what being a good teacher requires you to do, right?
It's so true. So if I can pick out one major theme that I see amongst all of your courses, it's the idea of mission and leadership, how leadership attaches itself to mission.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of, in a way, interdisciplinary, as you're mentioning, bringing in John Cotter, as well as a lot of other authors that we could talk about in terms of just authority and leadership.
Right.
Why do you think that talking about leadership and connecting that to theology is so important?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I think leadership is happening everywhere, and you have people engaging in leadership in so many different environments. So whether you're senior pastor of a church, or you're leading the worship band, or you're leading the youth group, leadership is a key part of working with people. And so as we think about, there's lots of principles or theories out there that people have learned about leadership from more of a business world, but we're thinking through, okay, how do we in the church live out our call? And yet we work in teams and we work with people and we have to lead people. And so there is a need for us to continue to develop and think through, what does leadership in the church look like? And as we're going to talk about, authority in the church. And how to use those things well, how to lead well, but then also because we're working with people in a environment that's different than just a for-profit business, we also have to think through the relational and the spiritual side. And so it requires us to think about teams in a different way than you would if you were just working for some business.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for me, the phrase comes to mind: we are always leading others, but only sometimes do we realize it.
That's a great way to put it.
That seems to be the flavor behind what you're especially saying at the beginning there.
Yeah.
Yeah. And here's where the fun part comes in.
Yeah.
When we're thinking about leadership and the fact that we always are leading both up to those who are above us and down to those who are maybe serving with us in ministry, at a lower level of authority, supervision, something like this. The tricky point comes in: how do you use that leadership? Mm-hmm. Do you use that well, or do you not? And there's another stream I want to bring in here. I think this is where my courses in theology intersect with yours, probably. Yeah. The idea of abuse of power.
Mm-hmm.
Power is a huge driving force behind how we think about leadership and connecting it to theology. In fact, I'm writing a course now that's in cultural studies.
Yeah.
Bridging basically theology and culture. How do we do this thing well?
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of the major modern theories from 19th century moving forward, 1900s, is that 20th century? I don't know, the 1900s.
Sure, we'll go with that.
moving forward, they center around a guy named Max Weber, a German, basically social scientist, sociologist, and in his idea that power is, power is evil? That's not exactly it. That power is whatever that, like, bad. And that is what set a lot of modern thinkers off, including in missiology today. The underlying current is this idea of abuse of power. So we're going to come to that. I'll let you respond, and then we'll jump into a text after our lightning round.
Great. Yeah, I mean, I think we all naturally feel that authority and power can be abused. And we have just kind of this natural reaction. We don't want to be controlled. We want our own freedom. And so it is easy to look at examples of abuse of power and to therefore to have a strong reaction against that and to want to say, well, we don't want that. So then what do we want? And the extreme, the pendulum to the other side can be, we don't want any authority. We want to just be completely free, autonomous individuals who can do whatever we want. But that's not really realistic, and that's not ultimately what we want or what is healthy for society. But yeah, I think there is a strong sense, and even here in Europe, there's a very strong sense that power is abused, and oftentimes we think that those who have power, they must be abusing it. And there's a natural suspicion towards those in power.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The most humble form of using power is knowing what you are submitting to and why, perhaps.
Mm-hmm.
Because, I mean, it is true, as you're saying that, I'm thinking we all are leading others at all times. And so that also means that we also are actively submitting to something, even if it's just our own people group and how we function in terms of cultural practices and things. Like, we willingly submit to things all the time.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think we'll get into clarifying how we're leading and where we lead and where we're submitting.
For sure.
And so there are levels where you have authority and you're a leader, and there's levels where you are called to live in submission and you're under authority. So we all are under authority somewhere, and we all have opportunities to lead, and we've been given authority in certain domains of life, and thinking those things through is really important, and understanding how authority works, where it comes from, is important. But I think the answer, and we'll get into this, but the answer is not no authority, but it's healthy, humble, gentle authority. And we'll unpack some of that.
Oh, that's amazing. Well, we're gonna take a pause now. We're gonna enter our lightning round.
Okay.
Again, praxology at formmission.org.uk, because I'm pointing at you who are watching, and I'm pointing to my ears for those of you who are listening. We would like to have a better title for this segment. We still don't. I'm not creative. Maybe Landon will come up with something right now.
I like lightning round. That's good.
It gets the point across.
Yeah, but it's got to be fast, you know?
Yeah, your answers have to be fast.
Okay, my answers will be fast.
So I've got my phone out. Landon's never seen these questions. These are my show notes here.
Oh, boy.
I'm holding them up on my iPad.
Here we go.
My phone. Here we go. And this is a question that comes actually from last night. I had a nice dinner with my family at a place called Pizza Coliseum.
Oh.
Now, there's 2 Pizza Coliseums here in Ostrava.
Yes.
My opinion, one's better than the other. This is the question here. Best pizza you've ever had in the world, where is it?
Oh, best pizza. That's a good question.
See, now you're overthinking.
Yeah, New York.
That was unexpected.
Manhattan. Yeah.
Here I am living in Chicago for a while before coming here to check, and I'm like, it's got to be Chicago, that deep dish.
I don't know if I've actually had the deep dish. I think I might have had it once, but it was a little overwhelming.
It makes your stomach hurt.
Yeah.
Honestly.
It overwhelms me. Like I look at it and I'm like, I'm gonna put so much cheese into my body. I don't know if it's gonna be good for me.
That's true. Yeah. If you're ever on Trafalgar Square in London, there's an awesome Italian pizza place. It's like it's rated one of the top in the world. We stumbled across it by accident one time. Fantastic.
Hey, I like me a good pizza.
So we'll get much more serious now.
Great.
We're going to talk about power.
Yes.
So tell me, what is your superhero power of choice and why?
All right, my superhero power, I mean, I'll give you two. One would be able to fly, because that would just be awesome. The other one, which probably most people think would be weird, but not to have to sleep. If I could not sleep, I just feel like I could do so much more with my life. If I just naturally regenerated my power every day, or if like I could sleep for like 5 minutes and just have the same energy of sleeping for 8 hours, that would be my superpower.
Again, that's an unexpected answer. This is going well so far.
That's great.
Which food do you think gives the body the most power or energy?
Kale. I'm a big kale fan. Huge. I'm from Southern California. We like the sunshine and we like kale.
There's two people in the world, two different kinds of people. One who likes kale and one who hates it.
I love it.
You're sitting across from somebody who would rather just have
Bring
lettuce.
it on. And some broccoli and some spinach. Bring it on.
Nice.
That's right.
You use power well by putting it into your body with good nutrition. So, describe appropriate use of power using an animal, like those animal personality tests.
Yes.
So bring in something. Describe appropriate use of power using an animal.
All right, animal metaphor. What animal represents a good use of power?
Could be very cultural as well, but.
All right, I'm shooting from the hip here. I'm gonna go with the dolphin. Dolphin's my favorite animal, so I'm slightly biased. But dolphins are very relational creatures. They travel in packs. Dolphins care well for their young, and dolphins, I've been told, that you can fact check me on this, but I've been told that dolphins have the same partner their entire lives. So there's just some really unique things about dolphins and the way that they act, and I think a dolphin can use its authority pretty well. They're not domineering, and they also protect other species. So like there's instances of dolphins protecting humans from sharks. I particularly am interested in those stories because I surf. So
I was going to bring that up. Yeah.
I think that's a very good use of power. So I think dolphin's a good example.
Yeah, you would think of dolphin because you like to, when you're in California, you hit the waves.
Right.
And you're doing some surfing with the dolphins.
See, that's actually a good example. When you see a dolphin and you're a surfer, you calm down. When you see a shark and you're a surfer, your stress level goes through the roof. So dolphins,
I don't surf.
I think that's a good example of a leader, right? A good leader, when you see them, your stress level should go down and you should feel at peace and like you can trust them. And if you have a bad leader, like a shark, your stress level goes up. There you go, Sean. Good question.
There's a bumper sticker there.
There is.
Be a good leader. Be a dolphin.
Like a dolphin. Wow.
Oh, that's amazing. What's the worst book you've ever read about leadership?
Ooh. Worst book? I don't know. Man. Oh, okay. Well, this is going to sound a little weird, but Mein Kampf by Adolf Hitler. I'll say that's the worst.
I'll accept it.
I'll put that in there for the worst. I read parts of it. I didn't read the whole thing, but when I was in college, I got a copy of it and read some of that. And yeah, I would say that was a bad example of leadership.
You could include that, I suppose, in a historical study of leadership or something. Yeah. It's not directly a traditional
not a
book
traditional
on leadership.
text. For some, it might have been at some point, but definitely not.
It's true. Yeah. I mean, it definitely influenced a certain kind of a way of leading.
That's
for
right.
Sure. Now, let's end it here. Best book on theology and leadership that you would recommend?
Both, like one book or two books?
You can do two if you want.
Okay.
Your first time, so I'll be nice.
So, man, so many to choose from. I don't know. Best book on leadership. All right, I'm going with what pops in my head. It's the lightning round. So the one that I've been reading right now, I don't know if this is the best, but I've been reading The Disciple Making Pastor by Bill Hull, and I really enjoyed it. I gotta say, it's just challenged me to think through how pastors prioritize the importance of discipleship and the way that they look to Jesus as their model. And I think he's just said a lot of great thoughts in there. I don't know if it's the best I've ever read, but it's definitely at the top of my mind right now because I've been reading through it lately.
Yeah, cool. There's also another book, The Relational Pastor by Andrew Root.
Yes, you mentioned that. I have not read that one.
He's got some really, really good stuff in the realm of like youth ministry and that kind of thing. And the relational pastor is a good one.
That's great.
That'll end our lightning round. And now
I survived.
You survived. And now we get to the real reason that we've brought you onto this episode.
Okay. I thought we were done. I thought we were done. No? Oh, all right. We'll keep going.
Lightning round over. Moving into the more serious matters.
Yes.
Authority, power, teams.
Mm-hmm.
So I've got a list of several questions. We'll see what we get to and where this leads.
Great.
As always, bring in some scripture, whatever you want.
Great.
But we're going to focus on one particular book for the sake of just clarity as we're speaking, and you can give some defense of why this book is chosen.
Mm-hmm.
But why don't you introduce the book to us and your connection to its author?
Yes, great. So the book that we are looking at is called Authority, How Godly Rule Protects the Vulnerable, and this is by Jonathan Leeman. And I'm going to go here to the cover so I can say the full title here real fast. 1 second.
Mm-hmm.
Authority, How Godly Rule Protects the Vulnerable, Strengthens Communities, and Promotes Human Flourishing. So this book has actually just recently come out. It's through the 9 Marks Publishing, and it is by Jonathan Leeman. So I've got connected to Jonathan Leeman because my pastor actually gave me a book by him called Political Church. And I read that book, and it rocked my world. Very influential on me and my thinking, but he talks a lot in there about the role of authority and understanding authority. And I have to be honest, before reading that book, I had not even really given a lot of thought to this idea of authority in any complex way. But then he's come out with this book, which is not as long or as complicated as Political Church. And he's just focusing in on this one issue, which is authority. And so it's just come out, and it's, I think, a great
2022?
resource. 2022, mm-hmm. Yep. And done by Crossway. And yeah, so I think Jonathan Leeman is just a incredible thinker, theologian, focuses a lot on areas of ecclesiology and the church. And he has helped us think through this important issue, which right now is just a really hotly discussed and debated topic, right? Is what is authority? And like we said at the opener, a lot of people just don't like the idea of authority. And so to talk about it is not always easy or comfortable, but he takes it on. And also he incorporates a lot of stories and a lot of life experience. So it's a book that I think could be read by many people, not just for the academics, but it has broad appeal. And a second connection to him is actually I will be taking a course with him. So I am a PhD student at Southern Baptist Theological Seminary in Louisville, Kentucky, and I'm modular, so I go out there twice a year for 2 weeks. So I'm about to go out there, and I will take a class with him called Pneumatology and Ecclesiology, which I'm really excited for. So I will get to know him personally also at some point.
Yeah, you know him via email at this point.
We have communicated by email. I mean, I told my wife last night I was a little like excited. I'm like, he's kind of like for a theologian and for a aspiring teacher and theologian, he's kind of like one of those heroes, superstars. So I was excited to get email from him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think as a caveat, this book I've read a good majority of it.
Yeah.
There are some takeaways for a European audience, though that is not his intended audience.
That
because
is true.
He teaches at Southern in Kentucky.
Yeah, and he's in the U.S.
Mm-hmm. But I don't think that should shy Europeans away from reading.
Yeah, I think the principles of authority and the biblical foundation for it apply hopefully in any context because of the eternal relevance of Scripture. But some of the stories and some of the examples may not resonate as strongly here. But I think as a whole, yeah. As I'm working through the book too, I think there's just a lot to benefit from it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and interestingly, in the title, he uses the word vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll connect it back to, again, that of course I'm writing and the abuse of power.
Yes.
Being behind a lot of this stuff. And I think it's definitely part of the reason, like what gives rise to the book appears to be that abuse or confusion of authority, as he might say, and how to use it. So he says, a direct quote, "Human beings generally have a problem with authority." He lists pastoral and church authority, male authority, government authority, police authority, and these alone are not like enough to get people anxious. I think on the edge of their seats, like, oh, what are we going to talk about here? What's the Bible have to say about that?
Right.
For our European audience, how would you maybe contextualize some of these things? Which kinds of authority may you add?
Yeah, well, as I hear that, I get a little angsty. It's like, oh yeah, okay, like we're gonna have to talk about authority in all of those areas. Like
This is being recorded. Ugh.
That's not comfortable. And I know there's the very strong opinions and ideas and thoughts on all of those levels of authority. So for sure, I think, in a European context, it's also relevant, and it's also an issue. I think obviously the political authority is a very important one here, because there's just been lots of instances of very strong abuse of political authority. And even what's happening right now in the war between Russia and Ukraine, you can just see what oftentimes has happened is there have been very strong leaders that have risen to power, and they've used that to bring about great suffering and harm to expand their agenda and their will. And then the fallout is that many civilians end up dying. And so I think that is for sure an ongoing topic that has a lot of relevance in this part of the world. And even as we see what's happening in Israel and Gaza, there's an ongoing discussion about military, we could say authority or use of authority, or the way in which you engage in conflict. And that's not directly a topic that you mentioned, but I think there's an ongoing question there of how do nations engage with each other, and when war is taking place, what is ethical ways to engage in war, what authority and not authority do soldiers have when interacting with civilians, and so on. So that might be another one I'd throw in there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there's the random book that's just come out from a biblical theologian, I believe. It's on violence in the Bible, and it brings in like talking about some of these things.
Right.
I wish I could remember it.
Right. So war, that's another area where we can discuss and throw into that category.
Yeah, and so maybe it's more police authority in the U.S.
Right.
Here in Europe, definitely more that military nature.
Right.
How do we think about that theologically?
Mm-hmm.
We're going to sidestep that.
Yes.
We're gonna
that's
move
not for
forward.
today, but you asked, so I threw it out there.
No, it's very, very well done. So I'm anxious to get to parts 3 and 4 of this book on how good authority works and what it looks like in action. But we need to sort of introduce it here at the beginning of the book, the middle of this episode. We'll focus attention on the biblical. And Lehman makes a connection to an answer, I think, by connecting two things, authority and submission. It's part of the reason why I said what I said earlier regarding how we submit to people and what we submit to. Yeah. So at a high level at this point, what is his reasoning behind the need for discussing submission with authority?
Right. Yeah, because they do go hand in hand, right? I think first off, we have to understand from a Christian worldview, we believe there is a creator God who's created the world, and therefore he is ultimate authority, and he has the right to say what is good and what is bad. And then he has created man and woman in his image, and part of that is delegating authority and responsibility to them. But that is always a responsibility that comes under the authority of God, and so there is a submission. And so when you look at any authority that exists today, whether it's a government, whether it's a pastor, a husband, a mother, a leader of a business, they all do have authority that they've been given in those positions of leadership. But they are still submissive. They are still under the under the authority of someone else. And so there's always a level that we need to think through submission and its relationship to authority. And when we understand ultimately, I would say, when we understand ultimately that we're connected to a divine being who has created us in his image, then there is a level of thinking differently about our authority versus if there is no God, then our authority has basically no limits. It's whatever I can achieve or accomplish, or however much power I can gain, I can use, and there's no accountability.
Like Thanos in Marvel.
Exactly. Just gain power for the sake of power and to use it for your unbridled desires and will, where the Christian worldview says any authority will always have to fall under the authority of God.
Yeah. Are you watching Loki?
No.
No. I'll say this whole notion for those who are, he who remains, is he a Thanos type character? Perhaps, maybe.
Right. I mean, and that Marvel world and Thanos character, it does a great job of, in a dramatic way and in a cartoon way, but still nonetheless, it shows what happens when people have an unbridled pursuit of power and they use it for their own ends and the destruction, whatever their motives may be or their good they think they're trying to achieve. If they don't understand that they're under a greater authority, then there's a lot of distortions that happen.
Yeah. Or maybe power for the wrong reason.
Yeah.
Because power itself is not bad.
Right.
But there is this assumption today that power is bad, and therefore you chase power, you're just wicked and evil.
Right.
And if you want to use it for a bad reason, yes.
And that's where I think the submission piece comes in, why we have to talk about submission also, because if we're not aware of the fact that all of us are called to submit to an authority, then that's where you have clear abuse of authority and power.
Yeah. And actually, this goes really well into our next question here. In the introduction, Lehman asks, who are our heroes? And his point is the hero movies like Marvel and so on cheer on from a Western perspective. And I think what he means by that is basically just American, like Hollywood perspective. And that is anti-authoritarian, which is interesting to think about. A direct quote, the hero we cheer on is the person who resists the leadership, the system, the powers that be. And then Lehman continues, when you open your Bible, by contrast, a very different kind of hero emerges. These heroes often resist tyrannical rulers. Yet another more central theme is always present in the Bible's picture of a hero. From start to finish, no matter what story is being told, the biblical hero is the person who is obedient to God. At this point, Lehman pulls out what seems to be, obvious, that the real world picture does not always celebrate obedience in heroes, or at least the right kind of obedience. So I think we're at an inflection point where obedience and anarchy are conflated together. Where do we go from here, do you think?
Right. Well, I think it's great to think about the influences that are around us and the movies we watch and the things that pop culture are telling us. So I think it is good to stop and reflect. How does, for example, a leader in Marvel, a Marvel character, both the good and the bad, how do they give us examples of leadership and heroes? And we are shaped by those people that we celebrate and we idolize and we model ourselves after. And so, yeah, I think those types of Marvel-like characters, they are seen and they are portraying a certain image of leadership. And some of their characteristics are good, bravery, sacrifice, and so on. And some of them are not, selfishness and so on. And so there's a lot that we could highlight and look at from those characters. But I think Lehman's right to draw us back to the Bible and to recognize a biblical hero is always someone who is under the authority of God, recognizing God, and wanting to obey God in whatever circumstance they find themselves in.
And therefore maybe resisting government or some other type of other ruler for the right reason, not just because of anarchy.
Right. There are times where there is a call. The right thing to do is to resist and to step up and face the evil that is before you. And obviously we could think of like Moses with Pharaoh, where he is called and he is used by God to stand up to that authority. But Moses is in that whole process, right? He's a hero because he, in his own cowardness, he is submitting to God, right? He is afraid. He doesn't want to go. And yet God calls him and he eventually goes. And he does so because he knows he's been called by God to do it.
Yeah. And so this is going to sound random, but I have a point here. Do you know the singer Vanilla Ice?
Yes.
Okay, so if I say stop, what are the next words out of his mouth?
Isn't it stop, stop, baby? Oh, wait, no.
That's Ice Ice Baby. But in that song, he says stop.
Yes.
Collaborate and listen.
Yes.
So I think...
Wow, Sean, you're really bringing us back. That was was that 80s or 90s?
When I was writing content...
my childhood.
When I was writing content for this episode, it came into my head.
Yes. Great.
I have no idea why. I did not listen to that song that day, full disclosure.
Isn't it the Ice Ice Baby? Isn't it the song? Yeah, great.
Yeah, the song is just so...
Yes.
Iconic. And I can hide behind that word because what does that mean?
Yes, there you go.
If he says stop, collaborate, and listen, I think if we appropriate that theologically, we use authority wisely, is to embrace limits and know when to defer, confer, or collaborate with other people. What do you think of this idea?
I'll accept that. That sounds good. Okay, say your 3 words again.
Defer, confer, or collaborate. Maybe I should say defer, collaborate, or defer.
Yeah, I think that works. I think either of those pictures could be helpful. We have to describe what we mean by each one of those. But yeah, I'll give you the
when to
Vanilla Ice
defer
reference.
authority to somebody else.
To someone else, right?
When to collaborate and bring somebody in.
Yes.
So you're flattening a power structure.
That's right.
And when to confer with another, like ask a question or like
seek wisdom.
Like
Right.
you need what is that?
Advice.
Counsel. Like coaching or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great. Sounds good.
So that was just by way of fun. And I kind of want to press the issue here and say, related to what you were just saying, what about Bonhoeffer? Did he use his authority well and wisely in attempting to, well, you brought up Mein Kampf earlier,
right?
His attempt to overthrow
Hitler.
and assassinate Hitler.
Right.
Like, was that an appropriate form and whatever? But
right.
Lehman doesn't ultimately go into that.
No,
I think that would be a end all, like far.
Right. It's a very controversial question, right?
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, for those who don't know, Dietrich Bonhoeffer was a theologian in Germany during the time of the rise of the Third Reich and Nazi Germany, and he saw what was happening and realized that he needed to do something about it. And so he used his influence and his network of connection with pastors and churches to help try and bring about resistance to Hitler and ultimately to lead to an attempted assassination that had failed. And he was then connected to that assassination, and he was himself ended up being killed. I actually got to go and see the concentration camp where he was killed. Pretty fascinating. But he also was a writer and thinker and very influential. So yeah, I think his life story does raise a lot of questions. And I know I've thought about that. If I lived during that time, would I have, and I was a part of the church in Germany, would I have joined in that resistance?
Mm-hmm.
And obviously no one could have fully known what Hitler was doing, but the signs of what were unfolding, it was clear that he had very malicious intent. And there is an important question, which will bring us beyond our discussion today, but there's an important question of when is it right to resist the government and to resist those in authority?
And I think Lehman, in regards to Bonhoeffer, he would say probably, if I try to represent him well, it's not, is the answer yes or no? That's the wrong question to ask.
Yeah.
It would actually be exploratory. What in an exploration of Bonhoeffer's life led to certain decisions being made, and seeing what we can reflect upon theologically and learn from that. Yeah. Maybe is a better way to go.
Mm-hmm.
And
for sure.
In Lehman's text, a part of the reason I say that is because he uses scripture all the way throughout. Mm-hmm. So he's always trying to relate actual experience back to the Bible. It's a good method for reflection.
Yeah.
Walk us through how he's using Bible to unpack this idea of authority.
Yeah, so I appreciate Lehman in that he's committed to the authority of Scripture, and so he's wanting to try and pull all of his principles and convictions and ideas from Scripture. And so, yeah, there's a lot that the Bible says about authority and understanding the realms of authority and how those authorities are given, as we already mentioned, kind of as the foundational principle that God is creator, Genesis 1, right? In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. So that's pretty much everything. And then we see in Genesis 2 or Genesis 1 where God gives Adam and Eve dominion over the world. So I just want to read this for us real fast. It's really interesting. Genesis 1:28, and God blessed them, and God said to them, "Be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea and over the birds of the heavens and over every living thing that moves on the earth." So it's really interesting to see there that idea of dominion and of subduing and ruling over, being fruitful, multiplying. All of that has this picture of they are essentially God's ambassadors on the earth in the garden, ruling and reigning as his representatives over all of creation. And they were to do that because God created them in his image and gave them that authority. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So it's really kind of a foundational passage, right? At the beginning of the Bible, we see God giving authority. And then in the fall, we see the distortion of authority, where Satan comes in and he actually usurps God's authority and he usurps the man's authority, and he ultimately deceives the man and the woman into rebelling against God, and it leads to all kinds of problems. And so ever since Genesis 3, we have a problem with authority. Where Genesis 1 and 2, there were no issues. I think all the animals enjoyed being ruled by Adam and Eve. Everything was good there. But ever since Genesis 3, we have a major problem to authority. And so Lehman is aware of the biblical narrative and the unfolding of that story. And I think he helps us as he brings in different stories and different texts. And I think he has that diagram where he talks about like it says here, like the three kind of eye on good and bad authority. He says authority as intended in creation, good. Authority as experienced after the fall, bad. And then authority as restored in redemption, good. And so I think that's important for us to think through. It is possible today for us to have good expressions of authority because of redemption, because of the gospel, because of Christ's death and sacrifice on the cross, and now the filling of the new Spirit, of the Holy Spirit. But we're still going to have lots and lots of examples of bad uses of authority.
Yeah, and thanks for bringing in this. I flagged that and wanted to bring it in, so I'm glad you brought in this chart. And it's on page, 3, 4?
Yeah, it's at the opening, page 31.
Oh, page 31. And it's just a nice little sequence for those who like charts to make sense of things.
Visuals, yeah.
I flagged.
I don't know if anyone can see that, but I'll just hold it up right there. There you go.
He's holding up his iPad.
I don't know if anyone on the camera could see my iPad, but I did.
I'm not sure. It's maybe for those who have X-ray vision.
Yes.
Okay. Authority, the middle portion there, authority as experienced after the fall, bad.
Yeah.
Now I must admit, when I read this, I went, ugh. Like I had a bad reaction to that.
Yeah.
Because I thought, not so fast. I think he's speaking in general terms there. He's not trying to make this grand statement and saying this is true of all time.
Yes.
And I think because he says, direct quote from him, exercising authority teaches people what God is like. And so he actually is also saying, as we are on earth right now, that it's possible that exercising authority teaches people what God's like, then exercising authority is good because it shows people that God is good if we use it correctly.
That's right.
I like this flip of the script in a way to show that authority is not always inherently bad or a power move. But his chart here kind of makes it seem like that.
Yeah.
But he then goes on to show, for the purposes of authority, that we're to grow those under it, grow those in it, create groups, and teach what God is like. Maybe we'll land here before we continue into our next episode for next time. Building off of what you teach at For Mission, can you come up with some practical example or some way to interact with this idea to show his practical point? Grow those under it, grow those in it, create groups, teach what God is like.
Yeah. I mean, I think we could take each one of those and kind of unpack what that looks like. But for sure, so the first one, say it again, it was grow
those under it.
Yeah. So one of the hopes for any type of authority is that those underneath you flourish. And if you are using your authority well, that means you are providing, you're protecting, you're leading, and you're enabling people to use their gifting. You're not threatened by their abilities or their successes, but you're actually celebrating them. And when you lead and when you use your authority in a God-given way with humility, recognizing you're under God's authority ultimately, and therefore the way you treat others will be filtered through that reality, there is a humility, there is a patience, there is a respect that you will naturally give to those underneath you. And we all, I mean, my experience, we all desire to have a good leader over us. We all want to have someone who we trust, who we respect, who we know is educated, informed, making good, wise decisions. And so, yes, one of those things is that authority, when it's done well, it actually means those underneath you are thriving and doing well. That's a great way to test. Am I using my authority well? Is if those underneath me are doing well and thriving.
Yeah, no, it's excellent. We'll land it there. This is such a great discussion. We'll actually continue. I have some more questions I want to ask of you about Lehman's book. Yeah, and then we'll go in a sort of a more practical direction and get to know you a little bit more and what you've done over the last 9 years or so here in Europe.
Great.
Into the next episode. Along the way there, as we're finishing, I kind of just want to say, maybe it would be fun if our little learning community that we all share in here, known as Praxology, would create on the social waves of all those things.
On the social waves.
Yeah, social media stuff. Be a good leader. be a dolphin.
Oh no.
Or be a good leader.
Sean.
I'll take one from previous episodes. Be a good leader. Be the first sheep.
Be the first sheep.
Roman Toshek, that interview
All right.
is there's a
keep
shepherd,
working on
we're the
that.
sheep.
We'll keep
So
working
I
on
wonder
that.
what other people would say. Like, do you agree with Landon, or do you say, no, Landon, I think you're wrong. Here's a better animal.
Or-
Be a good leader. Be
Yeah,
this.
that could be a good question. In the chat, right? If there's a live chat, or like on social media, tell us, what animal would you choose that would be the best example of a humble leader or a healthy leader? There you go.
Let's get it going. That'll be. It's
That's
a
a
fun
good
way
one.
to engage with authority.
That's a good one.
And so that will conclude for this episode of Praxology, a podcast in collaboration with Formation College and Josiah Venture. Give Landon a shout out. Tell him what your favorite animal is for leadership, or express your thanks by writing to us at praxology@formmission.org.uk, or dropping a comment on social channels. Stay tuned for our next episode, again, where we'll get more practical and also more into use and abuse of authority. And for now, I say, well, what I think Lehman would tell us regarding biblical authority is to have a wise mind and a keen eye toward the good and the bad in authority, as we are sinners being saved by our righteous God, who is authority. God is authority, and God who helps us by his Holy Spirit to exercise authority rightly. And with that, we say, see you next time.
All right. See you next time.